welcome to CIO News. I am Khushbu Soni, your host for the broadcast and chief editor at CIO News. This is a recorded session and will be available on our website, that is cionews.co.in, and our CIO News LinkedIn handle. This is an exclusive fireside chat powered by Fortinet on cybersecurity in the rapidly changing times. It gives me an immense pleasure in introducing my guest for today. He's Mr. Kalpesh Doshi, the Chief Information Security Officer at FIS. Kalpesh has 20 plus years of rich experience in InfoSec, ERM, cybersecurity, project management, and BCM. Kalpesh has extensive management, consulting, operations, and practice development exposure across security disciplines, processes, technology, and standards. Kalpesh, it's an absolute pleasure to have you.
Same here, Khushbu. Thanks for having me here. And thanks, Alain, for the opportunity.
Great. I'm also accompanied by Alain Sanchez. He's the Chief Information Security Officer, EMEA at Fortinet. Alain has 20 years of executive engagement experience in the network and telecommunication domain. Alain joined Fortinet CISO office from Huawei Global Consulting Department, where he was in charge of the digital transformation practice, advising the board of the companies like Virgin Media, Telecel, Vodafone, China Mobile, etc. Alain, it's a pleasure to have you.
It's a great pleasure to be with you as well.
Great. So I'm excited to begin with this fireside chat and get both your perspectives. So I would want to start my first question with Kalpesh. Kalpesh, with this whole unprecedented challenges that we've been facing and the way pandemic affected and the journey that we are in of pandemic, how are you reassessing the security strategy and what are your thoughts around the security in the current times?
Sure. I think, Khushbu, I will always say there are two worlds. One is pre-COVID, another is post-COVID. And we say they're two different worlds because I definitely believe we'll never go back to the old world. Yeah. And that's the fact, right? We can't change that. We didn't have a lot of luxury to transition this over a decade. Practically, if you ask all of us, we had to transition to the new world practically in about a week's time or max a month's time, because across the globe, there were lockdowns announced and we had to adopt to the new way of working. To give you a context, in old days, we haven't used any new technologies to survive, which means work from home, VPN, remote connectivity, secure ways of connecting remotely. We're all there. However, the quantum changed overnight from the fact that only 5 to 10% of your workforces were able to use this functionality. You had more than 95% of the people who had to use that functionality. That's a major shift. And when such a shift happens, your underlying infra, right, would not be able to cope up with that demand. It could be the fact that in the old world, you had your own defense controls or you had your own defense that you design. And the new world, most of them may be redundant or they may be absolute, right? So it could be right from your perimeter security, you to walk into your offices, your office had a secure LAN or a WAN, and you had the control. So the administrator of your company had some control on the network and a lot of it. Today, you connect from your home networks, right? You could be practically be connecting even from a public Wi-Fi spot. So you have the freedom to connect from wherever you can. You also, a lot of organizations would also have to let users use their own personal devices to carry out the official work. So the risk is huge, right? And when we had to really react to survive, we had to do what was needed for business to bounce back. But as things settle down, I do believe we will have to look at it from a newer perspective. I completely believe we'll have to completely revisit all your domains of security and see how it's impacting your organization. a lot of organizations decided to go digital, move a lot of their applications onto cloud. They're done hastily. So how are you going to revisit them, reassess your risk, and then decide on your new measures to mitigate the risk? So reassessment or of your risk, or identifying your security posture is going to be extremely difficult. I think extremely important. But that's a difficult phase, as a lot of changes have happened on the fly. So now you have to calm down, relook at it and see how it really impacts your organization, and then decide on the controls.
Very true. True, Kalpesh. Alain, your thoughts on this?
I think Kalpesh very well described the acceleration that we were in a situation to live. And it is fair to say that the magnitude of this lockdown and the speed took a lot of us by surprise. We had contingency plans, but no one saw it coming up. I remember a very respected analyst company at the very beginning of 2020, I think that was beginning of February, they projected the number of people that were to work from home to 30% in 2023. And almost 15 days after that, 99% of, in my case, the workforce was working from home. So you see the magnitude. The thing that I would perhaps highlight, and to the credit of the cybersecurity community, by the way, is that during that moment, we did not only conduct business the way we did before. It was not only about business continuity. We continued as an industry, as a community, to innovate. A couple of examples. Digital transformation has grown 44% between 2019 and the end of 2021, as per a projection that I'm happy to share the source, by the way. And other markers of the digital transformation have continued to rise extensively. For instance, the investment in 5G was 96% higher in 2020 than in 2019, and we're not starting from scratch. So there are big growth percentage based on big numbers, dozens of billions of dollars. And these markers has shown that the entire industry continued to innovate. At the same time, we were faced to these new segmentation we had to do within the company, for instance. Access to resources was to rethink differently. We were in a situation to bring new expertise, for instance, to create a new breed of interactions with our customers in events that were looking like real events, but were virtual events. Access to new sets of data to refine our ability to answer to the market, because the market needs continue to change, even if people were working from home. So we had to invent, to protect, to open, to close, to segment, to enable people, to empower more people. That would be also one of the changes that I saw. Faster decision-making process, ability to people to take decision closer to the center of operations. And the word did not stop. The figures are not so bad. If we were contemplating the figures, if we had a time machine and contemplated the figures at the beginning of 2020 and look at the gross national products, for instance, for the entire year, we would be scared, right? And we would say, ooh, it's going to be a terrible year. And it wasn't a terrible year from an economical perspective. It was a terrible year for all the losses that, I keep thinking of all the losses we had, the human people that have gone every day. But we, as a community, have been brave enough to continue to innovate and at the same time to work in a different manner. And that paradox between the two engines was the essence of, in my opinion, the last 18 months.
True. I think very well said. In fact, like you mentioned, right? Doc, providing secured work from home environment and managing all the endpoints in the beginning of the whole pandemic was one of the key challenges, which CIOs and CISOs were, focusing on. So my next question is more around that. So if Kalpesh, what were the best practices that you think are to be followed to provide a secured work from home environment and also managing the endpoints?
Great. I think, Khushbu, again, the good thing is you didn't have to do something out of the world. You had to follow simple steps, which are always relevant, and perhaps you had to do things differently. So when it comes to your endpoint, you had to then ensure that when people work from home, right, the larger focus, and we realized, that when people started working from home, there was a rise in phishing attacks. There were, those were seen as threats. So
Right.
important thing over here is always believe you need to have a harmony of people, process, and technologies, right?
Right.
When you talk about people, you're as secure as your weakest link, right? So you may implement all, you could have $1 billion enterprise in terms of security controls, and you just need one person to click on one wrong link or download one file, and all your controls would have been compromised. So you have to really look at it from that perspective. Awareness is very important.
Right.
Also, what has been noticed is when we are in a new world, right, where people's interactions have reduced, the insider threats are rising rapidly.
Yeah.
Because in a corporate culture, when you meet a person, you have a lot of indication to see if a person is engaged or they're gradually getting disengaged. In a virtual world, right, it's easy to show up a smiling face for a couple of hours on meetings. Again, most of our corporate meetings do not happen over the video. So it's very difficult to judge the insider threat and the motivation, right, for insiders to carry out, activities which are deemed damaging for the organizations are higher out there. So you have to factor that, right? So there is that people or the process part, which will have to continue to address the newer risk that you see. Even cyber criminals are been more innovative. They know for sure that when you connect from your home, right, your networks and the way the connectivity would be there would not be as designed, as planned, or as secure as it would be when you connect from your office. So those vulnerabilities or those risks, or there is complete new threat vector out there, and they're smart. They're exploiting all of them, as available to them, right? So most important is from a technology standpoint, you need to have advanced protection mechanisms. So days of AV are gone. I believe those are not good, right? Because nowadays we've seen having an AV, there are so many days of attacks and all of them. So you need to have anomaly data, kind of defense you have. You need to have more correlation, or you need to have more advanced technologies. So we talk about EDR, right? So the days of antivirus protections are gone. You need endpoint detection and response tools where you monitor the endpoints, you monitor the behavior, you monitor the anomalies, and you then take actions on a real-time basis whenever they see certain risk or they see behavioral patterns which suggest they are not normal. So we're seeing more and more of those deployments. Organizations also moving to XDR, which is kind of more advanced and gives you more capabilities. There are now features that they built into that. So that is continuing to be there. Organizations also want to explore on UABA, which is you want to monitor the user behavior part of it, right? And are they really doing the right stuff? What is the kind of activities? What is the kind of the pattern? Because you don't have control over that, right? So those are going to be there. I think apart from that, you would have VPN, right? You need to have a secure network connectivity options, because if you don't give those options, all right, you are risking, your organization assets, because every user today kind of connects to, you don't necessarily connect to one application, right? When you gain access to an organization domain, you have access to a host of servers, host of services, right? So from that perspective, ensuring that those are done in a secure manner are also going to be critical and important from an endpoint perspective. So I think these are some of the things I would put it across as necessary things, for an organization that they should definitely, consider doing it. Yeah, I think those would be enough if you ask me.
Awesome. Awesome. My next question is around Kalpesh. How important is it to screen and assess third parties to address the cyber vulnerabilities in the banking and financial? And what steps should companies take on this front?
I think Khushbu is very important. I and also believe our regulator has also realized it. So on 31st December 2019, they released a detailed guidelines. Now, while the guidelines say it's for ATM switch providers or for payment service providers, but I do believe that those guidelines are kind of, I would say, if every organization looks at them, it could be a good framework for for organization to determine and understand what is necessary from a third party security perspective. uh, you are going to depend. See, when what is happening is you have to collaborate, right? The world that you're moving in, and definitely, Alan spoke about that there's a rapid change in the technology piece. So you're going to rely more on your vendors, collaborators, partners. You have to depend on them. You have to open your networks for them, so on and so forth. So from that perspective, it's very important that you have the right screening process for your vendor. So we normally call it as a vendor management process or a policy. uh, you have to realize now, yes, there's always an argument. How do you use a same yardstick for every of your vendor?
Yeah.
Let's say if you have a vendor who's cleaning your office, right, or who does a mundane job, would they be subjected to the same level of controls vis-a-vis somebody who's developing a critical application? The answer is no, because the very, security is all about common sense, right? So, and that's what we keep on applying. So you determine what is critical. So you need to then have classification for your vendors. But one thing that we should do is every vendor that supports your critical application, critical infrastructure, and that manages the critical data needs to have exactly same level of controls, if not more, than what you have in your organization. It has to really be compliant with best practices. There are benchmarks. We could always say ISO, 27001, and so on and so forth. I don't believe they are a destination, but they are a good starting point to at least determine that organizations at least have basic security structures in place, right? So those things are necessary and have to be done consciously, especially when you're dealing with sensitive data. And I do believe that when you talk about partners, you have to be sensitive about how, what is the kind of services a partner is going to engage on. There will be touch points with your organization. You're going to open your organizations to the partner, to your vendors. So you have to do that in a secure manner. So how are they going to access it? How are they going to build security around that? What are the access mechanisms? All of that will have to be looked into. So that end of the day, you don't expose your organization assets, to vendors. There are cases where a vendor has unlimited access to all the data, and all the applications which they should not be having it. So you need to have then the right level of controls to do the segmentation and make sure that they only have access to those devices and those applications and services for which they're contracted to work on. So those things are important.
Sure. Alain, would love to hear from you as well, since you work with a lot of financial organizations and banking as well. You interact with a lot of CISOs on day-to-day basis. So love to hear your thoughts on that.
I think, first of all, I want to highlight how accurate Caldef's vision has been so far. When you just described some of the fundamental engines and innovation that are happening. I will highlight just a couple of them that you said and perhaps offer a view of what the other part of the community are seeing, that same engines of change and how they address them. One of them that you described is very important to me, Kalpesh, is the rise of the edges. You mention it as you talked about these new partners that are coming in our ecosystems. And you also mention it when you talked, obviously, about the work from home. So we see the rise of the edges as one of the new battlefield in the financial CISO community, because new banking applications have emerged, new ability to interact with your own banking advisor with a conversation on a mobile like that, and at the same time accessing very critical and very confidential data of your company as regards to investments, returns on some of the projects you are conducting. And the financial knowledge has been one of the elements that have enabled us to continue the innovation, not only the financial sector itself, but all the companies that were customers of these financial institutions that could still rely on their data, rely on their advisors to conduct mergers and acquisition, to make investment or de-investment in some cases. And the performance of the edge network also has increased. One of the things that is the unsung hero of 5G, for instance, is not only about the speed, but it's also a low latency time, like we've never seen before at the edge of the network. And that enables a new breed of applications to emerge, applications that are in the network and software world, the equivalent of what we witness in the organization world. I will call that empowerment. Empowerment is people that can take decision, have to be close to the field, close to the operations, close to the agencies, close to the customers in the financial sectors. And because of the network as a small latency, you can have algorithms that happen at the edge of the network without necessarily to come back to a core application. So some of the executable, advanced artificial intelligence propelled parts of the core software network migrates to the edge. Things are happening, routing decisions are happening, authorization decisions are happening at the edge. And that's a big change. And that change is one of the things that have accelerated what we call the adoption of the zero trust network access. And it's a very good concept, but it's a strange world, right? It doesn't mean that we are going to stop trusting our customers in the banking sector or stopping trusting our third-party consultants. No, but it does mean that any transaction, any software, any device, any process is scrutinized in a machine learning oriented way, so that we can immediately detect that even if the credentials are correct, the way the process, the machine, the software acts is unusual. There's a gap between a baseline behavioral that we have machine learned and the actual behavioral. And that enables you to have, in addition to the typical defense mechanisms of the network and the security, like segmentations, VPN, access control, authentication, credential, two-step authentication. In addition to that, we keep all that, of course we keep all that, but in addition to that, there is a real-time mechanism that compares the way the process does, the number of applications that are open, the number of files that the process asks access to. And even if they are into the authorization perimeter of that process, the access can be denied or flagged or sent or routed to another place just because they are so unusual. And that zero trust network access is probably something that existed before, right? But that has been propelled, accelerated by the need to make sure that in order to maintain this continuity in the business, we have to authenticate. We live in a hyper-connected world. We live at the edge of what Klaus Schwab, the founder of the World Economic Forum, has called the fourth industrial revolution, which is the merger of the physical world, the IT world, and the biological world. Now, we may never cash the benefits of this fourth industrial revolution if we don't secure our transaction, if we don't make sure that this level of authentication is conducted. I can accept a great consulting financial advice, but only if I'm sure that this is coming from my financial partner. And how can I be sure that the voice can be faked, the access can be simulated, a strange connection can be established? Now, if I have zero trust network access, there will be a series of parameters. We monitor between 50 and 120 parameters that show, this is weird, right? It's a little bit like someone stealing the keys of your car. Yes, your car will probably start. Now, the way it's driven, the speed, the itinerary, the way you park, the way you behave on the road, that's not daddy. It's not like him, right? And that is the zero trust network access philosophy, a real-time mechanism to grant in a context-sensitive manner all the authorizations that are necessary to conduct any network transaction. And I think that's some of the things that we will see, and we are seeing now very importantly adopted at the moment.
Very true. I think like you mentioned, zero trust is emerging as a new cyber security. So great insights. My next question is around, why financial organizations have now started moving rapidly to digital, and there is a strict compliance brought in by the regulatory for digital transactions. What are the best practices to manage security for digital transactions? So maybe love to hear from both of you. Maybe we start with Kalpesh and
Sure.
Yeah.
I think, Khushbu, again, the basic hygiene has to be maintained, right? So, there is an explosion. I think Alain put it, put it in the right context. Every organization or every banking or every financial industry is trying to create innovative products. They want to reach out to the customers in newer ways. And we're seeing an explosion of, opportunities or explosion of technologies, right? Be it to, function your digital payments or be offering new services. Every day you hear about a new service, right?
Yeah.
So there is definitely an evolving space out there, right? So every organization is facing the same dilemma. There is a lot of focus on digital innovation. What will also happen is we're kind of moving away from a centralized data center to, I would say, a borderless data center, right? Or a boundaryless data center, because earlier, one thing that pandemic has done, right, is it's broken a lot of myths. So the myth that your data can only be secure, or you can only host your data in your own data centers, I believe that's obsolete today, right? Because organizations are adopting to the cloud. They are kind of migrating their applications. Beauty of that is it may not be one cloud, it could be multiple cloud providers. So there are a lot of choices available in the marketplace, right? So you could choose and pick what works for you for that service in that application. So that itself brings around a lot of challenges from a security perspective. So A is, as a CISO, right? Do I have visibility onto all the applications and all the assets that my organization has on the cloud? When, believe me, it's easier said than done, because you feel, yeah, you should have. But today, creating an identity or hosting an application on a cloud server may exactly take you half an hour, right? And you could have tons of your data already hosted on, let's say, AWS or any of the cloud service providers, right, for free. And if a developer wishes, they have access to the data, they could end up, exposing your data on the web. So those risks are there. So A is, you need to then ensure that there is a level of control, on you need to have a visibility on the cloud. So you have to invest on discovery tools, which will let you know what are the, what are the various cloud presence that you have. Security teams want to be involved at the right time, so that when you develop your applications, it's as simple as that. It's, if I have to repair, let's say, a train or any vehicle, it's easier to repair it when it's stationary, right? So same thing for an application where it's been built, that's the easier phase where it could really make all the changes and make all the necessary, I would say, upgrades in terms of security. Once the application goes live, it's more of trying to change an engine in a running train or a running car. That makes it very difficult, right? So you need to then ensure that security is baked in as part of the overall process of going digital. It cannot be an afterthought. It has to be an integral part of your very thought process of your journey to go digital. So if that is taken care, then it comes back to the hygiene factors. And hygiene is again going to be simple. End of the day, you still have the same applications, you're still using the same core infra, right? You're going to still have the hardware, going to have the same OS, you'll have the same applications. So then you apply the same logic. Go back to the common sense thing. So you need to then have the proper configuration. You need to do the proper hardening, because even today, it surprises that year after year, we still see that some of the major compromises happen because there were default passwords, or there were configurations which never got changed, or the fact that there was a vulnerability which everybody knew can expose your organization to a huge challenges or huge damages. Still, it was not patched and that was compromised, right? So those things have to be taken care, especially when you are going digital, when your servers and your services are going to be on cloud. Those things have to really be taken care of it, to make sure that the hygiene should have zero tolerance. So you need to harden, configurations have to be reviewed. One more important thing is, days where you could scan the environment or application once in a year are also gone. You need to do a continuous assessment. So reassess what is your security exposure, and then make sure that every known vulnerability is fixed. You may not be able to fix everything under the sun. At least the high criticals and mediums have to be treated. You need to fix them in a time-bound manner. So I think those things are going to be critical.
Alain, your thoughts on the same? Sorry, I don't know if I'm audible. Alain, your thoughts on this?
Yes, thank you. I think we are a little bit into a paradox when it comes to the legal framework that surrounds the security. On the one hand, these digital transformations that we help achieve create new situations of potential data breach, situation of exposing personal data like there was never before, particularly as you are in a complex ecosystem of adding value, where you have partners along the way, shipment partners, data analysts partners that will use some of this data for the good. But there are new situations. So new situations creates new laws, and they are necessary laws, because otherwise we will live in a transparent house, and nobody wants to be exposed 100% of his data, behaviorals, conversations, banking credentials, and banking information. But these new rules have, logically, they have fallen on the shoulders of the CISO. So we have to report more. we have to report on phenomena that are outside the typical IT and technical remit. So we had to change. The CISO role has expanded for the good. If you remember, 15 years ago, first of all, there was not such a terminology of chief information and security officers. We, security officers, we were specialists reporting to the person that reported to the person that reported to the person that talked to the board. Today, members of the board are turning towards us to ask us things such as, can we buy this company? Or what do I tell to the press to explain what happens? So it's a significant change in the scope itself for the good. But there is more risk, more responsibility, and more work to deal with. One of the advice I would give to my fellow CISOs is use automation to not have all your teams completely swamped in the reporting moments to take statistics from the network and convert it into financial or risk reports for legal purposes. And automation can be a very interesting ally of the CISO due to the skills shortage and due to the fact that we don't have unlimited resources. So this automation works properly as long as you use an ecosystem of integrated and connected devices that enable you to take the essence of what's happening at the network side, the flow of exchanges, the nature of the data, who is processing what kind of data. And then that data can be put in such a format that it becomes automatically integrated into a dashboard. And Kalpesh very rightly talked about visibility. Visibility needs not to be screened by the cloud. You need to see your application to report on your data for one legal and for one operational reasons. The legal reasons is you can outsource everything you want to the cloud. You can outsource your data, your CPE processing power, your storage, your software. You cannot outsource your responsibility towards and in the eyes of the law. If your customer data happens to be exposed, it is still your customers and you are liable for it. So, and from an operational reason as well, is you can optimize a lot by playing on the various and very creative value propositions of all the clouds provider. One of the fears we have as a CISO is, okay, but I'm saving some CapEx by outsourcing that dimensions of my information system, but am I completely in a point of no return versus this cloud provider? Does he have me forever? And what happens if the emerging of OT, all those devices connected and generates more and more data, explode my storage fees? And if my cloud providers changes the tariff of his storage, I'm stuck with him, right? So one of the things you want to do is to get your freedom back, which is having sometimes a great value proposition from Microsoft Azure, a great value proposition from AWS, a great one from Oracle, another one from SAP, maybe another one from Adobe. And at the end, you want to leverage all this diversity of the cloud value proposition. You can do that only if, but that's a big if your security posture transcends that diversity of cloud hosting and management. If you have your policy as one that gets implemented and provides you with visibility across the cloud, you can have an Excel spreadsheet in Azure, and you can have sheets in Google Cloud Platform, and you want to see visibility across that. And you want to make sure that your security policy of access sharing, processing, storage of this data complies with your security policy and not the cloud provider security policies. They did a sterling job. They're doing a sterling job as protecting their infrastructure. But what about your country-dependent policy on data protection? You need to make sure this is all happening, and you can go back and forth. And it is a very healthy pendulum back and forth mechanism to be able to do a testing here, get the data, look at the stats, do another one here, as long as you have visibility of all that. So cloud diversity is a richness. Maybe we can say that the cloud has saved us partly during the pandemic, but also the cloud diversity can be a weakness, can put you on the wrong side of the regulations if you don't get this security policy that transcends the diversity of the cloud. And that's one of the things I would suggest every CISO to always think about. Do I have full visibility? Am I not compromising my visibility for performance cost, return on investment schemes? Because this is also an attack surface that raises as you go about that. So as always, we have to maintain a proper balance between lots of different trends that may be sometimes conflicting with your own view of the security policy.
Wonderful insights. I think both, I guess, Kalpesh and Alain, wonderful insights, and I'm sure our viewers are going to get great insights out of this. And that brings to the end of the interview session. So thank you so much both for joining us today on CIO News and sharing your wonderful insights for the viewers.
Thank you very much. It was for me an honor to be with Kalpesh on this chat this morning.
Thank you, Alain. Thank you, Khushbu. Same here for me. A great honor, and I really enjoyed having, I believe, a very frank discussion and great insights. So great session overall. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kalpesh.